What's up, thinkers? Sean here. And listen, if you're new to the channel, welcome for joining us. And this beautiful young lady over here.
I'm Erica.
And we are so glad you guys have decided to come and join us tonight. The topic for tonight, we're going to be discussing the definition of atheism. Now, if you came here sort of looking for a WWE fight between the Christians and the atheists, I'm going to disappoint you right now. Okay? Believing Thinkers is all about, well, thinking, okay? So about God, but also about being intelligent and acting like scholars, not school kids. So what I'd like to encourage everyone to do, atheist, Christian alike, is keep it civil in the chat, okay? I don't mind at all if you guys want to push back and forth on arguments. That's totally fine. But what I would like for you not to do is no ad hominems, no personal attacks, no threatening anyone, obviously. If you do, you're going to get timed out the first time, and the second time, you're out of here. We're going to block you from the channel, okay? Because we want intelligent conversation. In other words, we want to elevate the conversation, bring it up a notch. This video is not to pick on the atheists tonight, guys. It's not to say that if what I have to say is correct, atheism fails and all atheists are wrong. That's not the case. Instead, what I'm making the case for is that I think it's possible that atheists may want to consider what it is that they're going to define themselves as. If what I say holds, it may be that there's a problem with some of, not all, of the definitions that are being used. And moreover, if anything, I hope this video just helps all of us all around to understand why the Christians are sort of scratching their head and why maybe the atheists on the other side are frustrated with the Christians, and all of us sort of, are left arguing back and forth instead of having good conversations about these topics. All right, so I wanted to make that point. That's the lights automatically turning on. I will turn it over to Erica, let her say a few things first, and then, while I shut off the lights, and then we will continue on. Go ahead, hon.
Hello, everybody. I'm just so excited to see you guys on chat. I might just ignore Sean and just hang out on chat all night long. What do you think, Sean?
Hey,
Okay?
let us know if you guys can hear and see everything okay.
Yes, I asked them.
Oh,
They
okay.
said they can hear okay.
All right.
Now, guys, if you have questions, please feel free to put your question in the chat with the capital letter Q in the beginning, and I'm going to save your questions, and we are going to have Q&A time, right, Sean?
Yes.
Right? So
Yep.
that's how we are going to see. But if we somehow missed your question, please, you might have to post twice. I tried to catch them all, though.
Awesome. I'm going to put both of us on the screen. There we go.
Oh, cool. I see.
Yeah. So, so if you're wondering where we are, we're not in two different parts of the house. We're just sitting on opposite sides of the desk.
Yeah.
It's because the desk that I have, it won't accommodate both of us on the side where Erica is. So this was it was a lot of work, but anyways, the best way to do this. So, all right, getting into the topic tonight. Listen, we're really excited to be, hey, Scott. Oh, man. Great to see you, brother. Been a long time. Well, not really that long, but still, it's great to see you anyway. Also, y'all, just so you know, because I have to reference, I'm going to be using some PowerPoint tonight to help elucidate what it is I'm talking about. If you see me sort of looking over, it's on a screen here. You can just see the screen out of the shot there, and so that's why I tried to set this up so that I'm not looking at a really weird angle away from the camera, but it's hard, to set it up right because of the lack of space that we have in here to really set it up the way we want. But in the future, we'll do a better job with it. So
many awesome
Adam,
people
awesome.
here.
Oh, we are really
We
blessed.
excited.
What an answer to prayer, man. We just got a lot of we've been praying a lot of people would not only show up, but a lot of folks we know and love. So this is awesome. What a blessing. So I'm going to get started pretty quick with the slides. Again, they're just for anyone just coming in, we expect that we may get some atheists in tonight. We love you guys too, and by all means, if you're here and you're just not, commenting, that's okay too. Just know that we are not your enemy here. The objective is not to bash the atheist. That's not it. Adam and I are close friends. Adam and Erica and I, and Scott as well. And so there are friends that we have that are atheists, and that's fine. And some of them might even be watching tonight. I have some really good friends, and that's there's nothing wrong with it. The objective here isn't us versus them, this sort of tribalism, which is kind of ironic since the name of our martial arts school is Tribe K, but that wasn't the intent. So just want to stress that again. But if people get out of hand, they're out of here. So mods, feel free. You can either, if somebody's just throwing out being insulting and rude, feel free to go ahead and, I forget the terms. What is it? Put them in timeout. Put them in the corner for 300 seconds, such an arbitrary number. Or if they're just, you think they're being unruly and they really deserve it, go ahead and bump them off the channel, or whatever the term is for that. You guys know what it is. All right. So I'm going to get started here with some slides, and then we'll get into questions. But if you guys have questions along the way, please do put them in the comment section, like Erica mentioned, with a capital Q. I am looking for the software I need. So, all right. So I don't have the ability, I don't think, to do the split screen of Erica and I on the screen with the PowerPoint slides. So sorry, guys and gals. She's the better looking of the two of us, and yes, I'm sure everyone, likes watching her better than my ugly mug, but it's just how it is.
Screen right there, I see it.
Yeah, so you guys should be seeing it as a sort of the way I would see it if I was editing it. One final disclaimer here is, please forgive me, okay, for any slides that are misspelled. I have been having a wicked bout with...
We did our best.
I've been having migraines regularly, and I have no idea why. No clue. And so I apologize. It's very possible I missed, when editing the slides, I missed something, so just forgive me for that up front. I've been known to misspell stuff as it is, so I'm just going to move some slides over here. So the presentation tonight is on atheism defined and the presupposition of atheism. Now, there is some controversy over what the name atheism even means. All right, but before I get into the definitions and the presupposition of atheism, presupposing that everyone's an atheist, right? We need to go over some terms real quick, because I don't want to be using philosophical terms and lose somebody in the conversation. And as a result, you think I'm talking about one thing, I think I'm talking about another, and we're going in opposite directions and don't realize it until the end of the video. And then you're asking questions and I'm going, oh, we're talking about two different things. So to clarify, propositions, okay? Now, I should point out, propositions in philosophy have a whole section in the study of propositions and truth makers and all these things. If you're familiar with all of that, truth maker theory and whatnot, which, if I remember right, is part of metaphysics, ontology. Don't worry about all that tonight. We're not getting that deep. For the sake of tonight, all I want to say is that a proposition is a primary bearer of truth value, okay? That objects of belief and other... I can't see my notes here. What does that say? Proposition something? And other propositional attitudes. There we go. All right, what is believed and doubted. Now, in other words, probably the most important thing to get from this, okay, is that propositions are statements that are either true or false, okay? However, there's a lot of statements that we can make that aren't. They just aren't by the fact of what they're talking about. For instance, if I ask, what is the date today? Pretty much any question is neither true nor false. I may be asking if something's true and false, but in and of itself, the question isn't true or false. It's not a dealing with that, okay? And I'm also going to oversimplify things, guys. So it's quite possible for all of my philosophers out there and theologians, if I oversimplify something too much, I could take it too far, and you could go, oh man, that's not right. Let me know if I've muddled something there. In an effort to make it clear, I might inadvertently simplify it too much. All right, imperative sentences as well, like please stop that. That's neither a true or false statement. An exclamatory statement, ouch, that's not true or false, okay? We're not talking about whether or not you feel pain. That's different. We're talking about the statements. And performatory statements, which are a little confusing. Sometimes they can be confused with imperative statements or other statements. I didn't give a lot of information on that. All right, so you can look up more about propositions for free online. You'll want to type in philosophy propositions, and a great resource is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The articles are free, and they're often written by professional philosophers and or grad students of philosophy, and so you're going to get good content. All right, moving on. So a couple more things. Sorry, that's the baby fussing. A couple more definitions. Belief. Philosophers of mind, okay, or the philosophy of mind, use the term belief to refer to an attitude we have roughly whenever we take something to be to be the case or regard it as true. Now, when I say their beliefs need not be a current, what I mean is that you don't have to be currently holding a belief for it to be a belief. So just until I started thinking of an example, which is the belief that I enjoy eating ice cream, or that maybe that's not a great example due to propositions, that the floor in here is wood. Okay, so that can be true or false. The floor in here is wood. So I wasn't thinking about that. That was non-occurrent, right? So in other words, it doesn't have to be a current in order for it to actually be a belief. I don't have to be entertaining it. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Again, if this stuff doesn't make sense, please do ask. Now would be a good time. So psychological state, all I'm referring to here, simply put, is your state of mind, okay, or the things you're thinking about. Now, just a little bit, we're going to be differentiating between a psychological state and propositions, and they are different, okay? And I mean, you can be thinking propositions. You can have a state of mind where you're thinking about propositions, but a psychological state is a bit different. We're going to talk about why in just a bit. And then a metaphysical or ontological claim, here I just am meaning ontology is generally what exists, what is. There are solid things, physical things, and non-physical things that exist. And no, I'm not necessarily talking about spirits and things like that, but you can have propositions and ideas that are non-physical. And if you're a Platonist and you believe those sort of things exist out in the sort of ether, whatever, it exists in another place, right, another realm, then that's different, okay? But there are things that are not physical that we talk about. And so metaphysics is sort of dealing with that, and ontology specifically, the study of what is. And so, but here tonight, I'm going to be talking about ontology or metaphysical claims that are just, in other words, if I'm making a metaphysical claim, I'm saying that something either does or doesn't exist, has some sort of property, these sorts of things. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, later on, when we see some of the quotes, hopefully that will make sense. So moving forward, okay. As far as the definition of atheism, let me lay it out here. Okay, and then this question of whether or not dictionaries are helpful will make sense. All right. And that is that some want to hold that the definition of atheism is the concept or proposition that there is not a God. Okay? And we'll talk about the history of this and where it comes from in just a minute, but I want to represent the atheist position fairly. Some atheists will say that, no, it's just a lack of belief. And because there are so many different views, that's the one view that embodies their position the most. Now, the question tonight is that a good idea to hold that as the atheist mantra? So if you're an atheist watching this tonight, listen, I'm not picking on you. I'm not saying you don't have good reasons to be an atheist, or that if I'm right, you should become a Christian. I mean, I'd love for you to, but that doesn't hold. That doesn't follow. That's a non sequitur, okay? So, and same thing for the Christians is if I say, hey, an atheist is perfectly okay with holding this position, there's no need for us to get upset and say, well, no, you have to define it the way I do. It's okay. But there will be logical consequences, I think, of defining atheism as merely a lack of belief. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight for the most part, along with a few other objections, but this is the thrust of it. So having said that, how do dictionaries define, the term atheism? So dictionary.com, the doctrine or belief that there is no God. Disbelief in the existence of a supreme being or beings. So now there, under dictionary.com, we would say, well, that's in line with what the Christian holds. Most Christians hold or believe to be the definition of atheism, and some atheists. However, if you go to Merriam-Webster, you have a lack of belief, there you go, a lack of belief or strong disbelief in the existence of a God or any gods. All right, and then B is a philosophical religious position characterized by disbelief in the existence of God or any God. So you have the weaker proposition and the stronger proposition. Now here I don't mean weak and strong like it's a weak argument and you lose. That's not what those mean. That's talking about the philosophical positions. All right, so far so good. Erica, you have anything you want to throw in?
Is it just me or the 1A definition kind of saying two different things? Or am I misunderstanding? Lack of belief or disbelief? Oh, it's saying it's either lacking a belief or lacking a... Wait.
Yeah, no, so what it is it's defining it the way the atheist.org,
Okay.
I think it is, will define it. Let's say it's either a lack of belief or the strong position is a disbelief in the existence of a God.
It seems like two different things, right?
It is.
Either lack
It
of
is.
belief or it could be strong disbelief. I think for some atheists they might say those two are different things, but anyway, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, and
do you thinkers have any questions?
yeah, any questions up till now, guys? And by the way, if you can't hear Erica, let us know. She does have her own mic, but we don't have a mic stand currently. So she has to hold. She may have to. I can't see her. The computer screen's in between her and I, so I don't know if she's holding it or if it's close enough. So just let us know. I hope Malachi's still here. Okay, so we're gonna move on then between those. So how should atheism be defined? Well, there is a debate over whether atheism should be defined as a lack of belief. Sorry guys, I have to move some things out of my way, so the slides may change here. If they do, I apologize, because they're gonna move when I click on them. I'm trying to move I can't do it without triggering. So should atheism be defined as a lack of belief or the proposition that there is no God? How do atheist scholars define it? Well, Graham Oppy is an atheist philosopher, and by the way, Graham Oppy is not only a brilliant man, but I really enjoy reading him, guys, because he's very reasonable. As any good philosopher, Graham doesn't make audacious claims or overstate the evidence. And he's patently atheist. I mean, he has no problem with that, but he's very pleasant to listen to talk to, and I have no problem conceding to some of his points. Obviously, we would disagree on the existence of God, but nevertheless, it's much easier to get somewhere with folks in a conversation, and we've never dialogued, the two of us, before, but it's much easier to get somewhere in a conversation when it's pleasant. Let's face it. If you're just arguing with people to score points, we're not doing anything effective. We're both just, if it's me and an opponent and we're just arguing to the point where we're blue in the face, nobody's going to walk away with anything new other than maybe a hernia, some cardiac problem or whatever. All right, it's not going to be a good time. So we want to make progress as we're talking, and our end goal should be truth. That's what our end goal should be, is to seek truth, not to stake out positions and defend those positions, but to seek truth. And in order to do that, we really need to be able to listen to one another and have good dialogues. So I can't say enough good about Graham. He's written a couple books on atheism. In Atheism, the Basics, he mentions that atheism is the claim that there are no gods, and atheists are those who believe that there are no gods. Given the way that I use these words, I maintain that it is true that the atheists also fail to believe that there are gods. Now, I do want to make the point that Graham, in fairness to him, will say to an atheist, hey, if you want to say it's a lack of belief, I think he says that's, he's not going to be hard on you about it, okay? So he's a nice guy. All right, again, you won't very often find philosophers making such hard, audacious claims. Or hard, firm claims. Does that make sense, hon, what I'm saying there by that?
Sorry, I was talking to people on chat.
Oh, never mind. That's fine.
What is it?
I was just asking if my statement made sense, but if you weren't listening, it won't matter.
There was a question, so I was reading that.
No, it's fine. It's good. So I can take that now. Is that the one from Air Church?
Let's see. Yes.
So Air Church asks, with rational human beings, is lack of belief that God exists even possible? How is it that not equivalent with the belief that there is no God? Well, that is an interesting question, Air Church, and we're going to discuss that very thing. Is it just the same thing? Is somebody playing a semantics game, and if so, why? What are the advantages to saying it this way? We're going to get into that. And we'll come back to Graham Oppy's position here in a little bit, but I'm going to give him a break for now, and we're going to come back to see some of his statements in just a bit. Well, if I can. So, also sometimes you will get atheists that will claim because it's just a lack of belief, children are atheists. Well, yeah, the problem is it depends on how, again, it goes back to how are you defining atheists? And what exactly do you even mean, right? What do you mean by the term that atheism is a lack of belief? What are you saying, that you lack a foundational concept? Or are you saying that you're just rewording the statement, well, if Christians have a belief in God, I lack that belief, which is equivalent to disagreeing with the Christian and therefore still saying there is no God. We'll get into that. But if you're defining it as truly you're not holding to a belief, could you consider children there? I would, if anything, I would say children are agnostic. They have no opinion on the matter of whether or not there is a God, because there the term agnostic would fit really well as sort of withholding knowledge or lack of knowledge, or depending on how you want to define it. That would seem to be the case. In other words, you would have had to have examined a position and decided whether or not there is or is not a God, or if that evidence is sufficient before declaring yourself an atheist. Even if it's a lack of belief, I think you would have to make a determination. All right? I could be wrong, and there may be atheists watching that want to say, well, no, because of this. Hey, tell me why. Just be polite. Again, we're all about dialogue. We just want to be cool with one another. So let's see what Graham has to say. Some of you have probably already been reading this, but he says innocence, which is what he's referring to in children and those that don't have mental capacity to make these sorts of decisions. Those who have never considered the question whether there are gods, and who for this reason have no opinion on the matter. Typically, innocents are those who do not possess the concept of God. They are not able to form the thought that there are gods. Examples of innocence include infants, those with advanced Alzheimer's, adults who never acquired the concept of God, and so forth. In all of these cases, there is a failure to believe that there are gods, but not atheism. So you see the difference there as to how Graham's holding it. And again, not only is Graham an atheist philosopher, he's an atheist philosopher of religion, guys. So this is sort of his right up his alley. PhD holding professor, teaches. I didn't select these quotes from him because they agree with me, because there are other atheist philosophers that think this way. The only guys that are generally going to hold to the hardline positions that tend to be very, I don't know the right word for it, because I want to be kind here. The kind of guys that just seem to be stirring the pot, though, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, so to speak, right? Dan Dennett, who actually is kind of reasonable at times, but Sam Harris, I'm trying to think of who's the Brit over in England that always gets all the press. Erica, do you remember the atheist that everyone always talks about?
Who is he? What are you thinking about?
That Craig's debate. I can't.
Who is this?
I can't think of it right now, but y'all can remind me. Anyway, these types of atheists generally are popularizers of atheism. Some are scientists, like Lauren Krauss, but again, they're not philosophers necessarily. So they're gonna, and they really are trying to get at people's attention. So they're gonna say some pretty wild things. And then you've got your YouTube atheists that aren't necessarily educated in any of these fields with at the doctorate level or even grad level, and they're making even wilder claims. I take statements from people to be authoritative when they have training and education in something and they're thinking about it rationally and reasonably, which is generally why I'm going to refer to philosophers. And again, most philosophers of religion, theologians, who are atheists, and yes, there are atheist theologians, guys like that, are much more reasonable than these, these four horsemen of the apocalypse, so to speak. And if you want to hear more of refuting Sam Harris, check out Trent Doherty's channel. Do you remember Trent's new channel name?
No.
Recovering. I think it's Recovering Reason. No, it's okay. It's Recovering Reason. It's Recovering. Yeah, it's fine. It's Recovering Reason. But yeah, you can look it up. Anyway, and he does a whole series called Slam Harris that he's been working on. So anyway, getting back into the discussion. So where does the idea atheism apparently atheism is a lack of belief come from? Okay, so the state of not believing in the existence of God or gods. This view was famously proposed by the philosopher Anthony Flew, who ironically became a theist before he passed away. And this arguably played a role in his 1972 defense of an alleged presumption of atheism, okay, which is the idea that, again, presuming that everyone's an atheist, and trying to sort of incorporate more people into your group makes your group look bigger and stronger and whatnot. And I don't know that that was Flew's idea, but I'm suspicious of it. And the editors of the Oxford Handbook of Atheism chose this definition as well. Okay, and there are modern atheist scholars who do like this definition. So, this idea that atheism is a lack of belief, though, suffers from some problems. All right, so some of the problems are this, okay, and this is what I want to say to my atheist brothers right now, is that, look, guys, you can make some good arguments against God. They exist. Some are better than others. But I keep mentioning these things called strong and weak claims. Strong claims are incredibly hard to defend and even harder to prove. And I have video of guys like Lawrence Krauss saying, I can't disprove God, and even Matt Dillahunty saying, yeah, you can't disprove God. And other more reasonable atheist thinkers at the high PhD level saying, yeah, look, there's arguments on both sides of the fence, and it's rational to believe either position. That's the kind of people that, when they're being rational and reasonable, is where the conversation should be. All right, rather than this chest thumping, bumper sticker kind of stuff that you hear all the time. It just doesn't advance the conversation. So what is the big deal about now? The LB atheism is referring to lack of belief. So I'm just shortening it there. So this statement's from Paul Draper, who is, I believe, an agnostic. He's not a Christian, I know for sure. I have a paper Trent sent me. The two of them are working on the argument from evil. I'm reading for a video that Erica and I are trying to get done on the argument of evil. I hope you all get to watch it. We put a lot of work into it. And here's what Paul has to say about this. Departing even more radically from the norm in philosophy, a few philosophers and quite a few non-philosophers claim that atheism shouldn't be defined as a proposition at all, even if theism is a proposition. Instead, atheism should be defined as a psychological state, the state of not believing in the existence of God or gods. Now, here's the problem. Remember what we said a proposition is earlier, guys? It's a statement that is either true or false. But if you're holding to something that's not a proposition, okay, then you're not holding to anything that's either true or false. Now, that is why Flew did what he did. He's actually trying to shift the burden of proof. All right, so that anyone holding this sort of lack of belief position can avoid needing to argue for their position, which is silly, because to be honest with me, I don't mind defending my position. The atheist doesn't need to be worried about, I don't care, unless they're making some wild claim that really demands a strong burden of proof. Generally, in most debate-type conversations, I don't mind assuming the burden of proof. I could care less, as long as it's not being thrust on me or I feel like somebody's sort of cheating. Does that make sense, hon?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
But here, if you avoid the burden of proof, you're also you're making the problem more difficult for yourself, because if you don't hold to a proposition, you don't have an argument. Now, what do I mean? Syllogisms are built on propositions, which arrive at a conclusion. So the propositions are your premise, or what's holding up the premises, which are like a pillar holding up the roof to your argument. Okay, your conclusion. All right. And so, if you without any sort of propositional content to hold all that up, you have no foundation on which to base an argument. You can't put forth an idea. So you want to be real careful about that. We're going to talk more about the ramifications that are going to follow with this if this continues. All right, you're going to see what happens here logically. It's going to become a mess for the poor person wanting to hold to LB atheism. All right, so just remember that and this isn't even me assessing this. This is Paul Draper, professional philosopher. I agree with him, but I'm not the only one saying this. He's got no dog in the fight. He's not a theist. All right. Which would be logically fallacious to say he can't say it if he was a theist. That would be a genetic fallacy anyway. But so again, from Paul, the belief that God exists. But here, belief means something believed. And I sort of cropped this quote, guys. It was so long, but I didn't want to leave out everything. So if it seems kind of like it's starting in a weird place, that's why. The belief that God exists, but here, belief means something believed. It refers to the propositional content of a belief, not to the attitude or psychological state of believing. This is why it makes sense to say that theism is true or false. So if you have a belief that God exists, you're talking about the proposition, right, that you're holding to. You're holding this proposition. So if we want to say, sorry, I got distracted and started reading some of the comments. So it's like, oh, I want to respond, but now I gotta finish my thought. Sorry, guys. So it refers to the propositional content of belief, not to the attitude or psychological state of believing. This is why it makes sense to say that theism is true or false. Why? Because again, you're referring to a proposition, and to argue for or against theism. If, however, atheism is defined in terms of theism, and theism is the proposition that God exists, and not the psychological condition of believing that there is a God, then it follows that atheism is not the absence of the psychological condition of believing that God exists. All right. So hopefully you guys are tracking on this. So Paul is just sort of laying out here to go, look, you want to be careful here, because theism is definitely a declaration of a proposition, okay? And we're not talking about a psychological condition, and so it follows that if that's the case in atheism, think of it this way: if it's the opposite of theism, that's fine. Now, there's some atheists that have redefined it, and they've said, no, that's not what we mean. Look, atheists, I'll respect your position if you're wanting to sort of modify it to fit what's going on in contemporary thought. I'm just trying to point out the ramifications of what you're doing as you commit to this position. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't hold a position. I'm just saying I don't know if it's the best idea to do. All right. So, what are the logical consequences? Boy, I can't talk. What are the logical consequences? I still can't talk of LB atheism. All right. If atheism is a lack of belief, then you literally are lacking a belief. Now we're talking about a psychological condition again. You have no proposition on the matter. And what that means is that this is a psychological state and fails to describe the view about if there is or is not a divine or semi-divine non-physical being. I'm just being sort of technical with the words there, all right? This creates a problem for the atheist who wants to then declare there is no God. The problem now lies in the fact that one has a belief. In other words, you've just shifted. If you said, well, atheism is just a lack of belief, but then you then make a declaration that there is no God, you have a problem. You went from one position to something different. And so, in fact, you now have a belief that there is no God, forfeiting the LB position. You've now changed positions. If the atheist wants to maintain the title of atheist, they must change their position to the metaphysical position, there is no God. Remember that term metaphysics, and particularly ontology, right? That's what we're referring to, is the existence of something. So that's what's going on there. So otherwise they're going to end up with a contradiction in terms. Now, to be charitable, they can certainly maintain their position, declaring their state of mind is such that it offers no counter to theism or any reason to accept theism. So, they could sort of just play the middle of the road, and that, hey, look, if you want to do that, that's fine, but you run into a lot of consequences, is my point. And I don't think it's a good idea to make such a weak claim about a position. Now, some are going to accuse me of a couple of different fallacies here. An etymological fallacy, which I'll address, and some other problems of not understanding the position. And believe me, I do. I've read up quite a bit on it, and I'll address some of that now. Did I read the last paragraph on that?
Let me see. You was talking about some fallacies, psychological state.
I think if atheism is defined as a psychological state, then no proposition can count as a form of atheism, because a proposition is not a psychological state. This undermines the atheist's argument. In defense of Flu's definition, for it implies that what he calls strong atheism, the proposition or belief in the sense of something believed, that there is no God, is not really a variety of atheism at all. At all. In short, his proposed umbrella term leaves strong atheism out in the rain, and that's sort of been my whole point all along. That last paragraph comes from Paul Draper again. I included a link to this article, ladies and gentlemen, in the comments down below, so feel free to check it out. By the way, I'm quoting a lot from SEP, which is Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Look, for $25 a year, you guys can be members. You can view anything for free on there, but you can download stuff, and I download all of their stuff for $25 a month. It's nothing. You get these beautiful PDFs. I print them. Eric and I read them. We mark them up. It's great.
All day long we have been studying.
Yeah, we have a stack of stuff behind Erica over there that we're working on for the problem of evil. It's a wonderful resource, particularly also because, I'll say this in this little excursus real quick, is that a lot of, I think I mentioned this before, a lot of the ladies and gentlemen that are publishing their articles, through SEP are either professional philosophers or grad students of the field. So these aren't just some random people that don't have, that don't know what they're talking about. And you'll actually recognize a lot of the philosophers that are publishing there. So while atheists and agnostics and innocents are alike in failing to believe that there are gods, atheists are distinguished from agnostics and innocents in believing that there are no gods. Now that's from Graham Oppy, Atheism, the Basics. Again, that's not me making a declaration here. Again, this is Graham setting this up. And all throughout this particular book, he goes and describes these different positions. It's not that I want to pick on you at all right, if you're an atheist. And Christians, I'm not saying, hey, go out and beat up on atheists with this information. It's what I'm trying to show is I'm actually trying to strengthen everyone's positions all around and elevate the conversation so we can get over all the silly stuff and get into the nitty-gritty of things and quit all the shifting of the burden of proof and all this other stuff that's just unnecessary. So, some objections, and this is probably where the page is going to be a bit more of a mess because I was doing this when I had a migraine, so forgive me, guys. If it doesn't make a lot of sense, I'll try to sort it out. So, sometimes I heard this objection a couple days ago in a chat on John over on What Do You Meme's discussion with Michael when we were all waiting for the video to get fixed. God bless those guys for working so hard. Something to the effect of, well, you can't define atheism because it is a combination of many different beliefs, and it's not a monolithic group. Since it's not a monolithic group, you can't just give it a definition. And another comment I've heard, this is on atheism.org, I think it is or atheist.org, is the statement that atheism is not a belief system, nor is it a religion. Now, if you don't want to call it a religion, okay. Some people say it is. I'm fine with somebody. That's fine. I don't agree that it's not a belief system, though. I don't have access to the paperwork in front of me, but I did a survey of some academic material defining what belief systems are, and I got to say, it really does fall into the it seems to fall squarely into the lap of being a belief system. Again, I'm not saying when I say it's a belief system, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. Let me go back to that first statement, though, that you can't define atheism because it's a combination of many different beliefs. This first objection confuses a definition with a description. So this is sort of akin to person A asking person B for the definition of a tree, and person B just objects saying, well, I can't give you the definition of a tree because there's so many kinds and they're so different. Notice that it confuses the idea of what you're looking for. Obviously, yeah, it would be hard to describe all the different kinds of trees, in one definition. But what you're asking for is a definition, which is different, okay? There are also different types of definitions, believe it or not. And in philosophy, oh my goodness, you get into clarifying terms quite a bit, different types of definitions, what definitions should do. So there is certainly a definition for atheism. Moreover, it should have both intention, okay, which is another way of saying content or meaning, internal content that constitutes a formal definition, and it should have extension, which is the thing that it's sort of talking about. Then you get into extensional definitions and whatnot. which I'm not going to dig into too much. You guys should look it up and do some study on it. It might be worth it if you're bored or you can't sleep at night. But extension indicates the range of the definition. So this should cover all of the views or cognates, the things related within the view of the set known as atheists. That's just a fancy philosophical way of saying that the definition should include all of the different positions that are inside of it. If not, then you have a problem of clarity, which in philosophy is a huge no-no. Clarity is one thing that we're constantly seeking and understanding. It may not seem like it if you've ever read philosophical material. Oh my goodness, it can seem like very, what are you talking about? But that's because the objective is to actually be as precise as possible. So if you have a problem of clarity, that's kind of bad. But then you also have a potential for logical incoherence. Now, I haven't made a case for that yet. And I said a potential. That isn't a hard stance that there is. Notice I didn't say there is logical incoherence. I said you run into the problem of potential logical incoherence. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. Moreover, the reference, the things you're talking about, should not be contradictory. In other words, it seems, and many people object, that if atheism is a lack of belief, it is not agnosticism. There is a difference. But a lot of atheists want to lump agnostics in. A lot of agnostics go, no, you might be great people and love what you're doing, but we don't have the same views about this position. And because the views are contrary, it causes problems with if we're going to start lumping in everything. Sorry everybody if that surprised you. I kicked my leg was falling asleep. I kicked the camera. So if the gentleman I was talking to, I assume was a young man, was saying that even people who are mad at God are atheists.
Yeah.
They believe that there's a God, I think, but they're mad at him. And I went, boy, that's really contradictory if that is lumped in with people who have a lack of belief and others who hold to the position that they're suspending judgment, which is your agnosticism. Mm-hmm. All right. Now notice here, I haven't objected, I haven't said that we need to define atheism by some ancient definition, which is another accusation I got accused of the other day, which was a fallacy of an etymological fallacy. Mm-hmm. The problem with an etymological fallacy is understanding how it works before you go throwing it out. And this is something that I see, ironically, John and Michael from IP, Inspiring Philosophy, were talking about this in the video while I'm having this conversation and this is happening. And this individual keeps throwing out, that's a fallacy, that's a fallacy, that's a fallacy. And I'm laughing, because those of you who know me know I'm working on a grad degree, interdisciplinary, it's including philosophy. I kind of know a little bit about philosophy, and I'm laughing because this person's misusing a lot of the fallacies. They know just enough to be dangerous, but half of it is being misapplied. And they were kind. I mean, it wasn't a vulgar, mean conversation at all, but a lot of it the fallacies weren't being used appropriately. So all of us, just so we're aware, professional philosophers rarely start throwing out fallacies, because A, they're generally not committing them, but B, it's just not something you do. That's sort of a cage stage philosopher, right? They just learn fallacies and they're quick to point them out, but to be honest, they don't often hold the way you think. They don't have the force, because they also don't disprove an argument, guys. All they prove is that the argument has to be revised in order to be assessed, so we can figure out if the conclusion is true or not. You could have an argument full of logical fallacies that still has a true conclusion. It can even have untrue premises and have a true conclusion. For instance, the moon is made of green cheese. My name is Fred. You are Maria. Conclusion, my name is Sean. Is my name Sean? Yeah, true statement. I mean, I can make it worse, but you guys get the idea, right? The problem is if we don't know that the conclusion is true prima facie just by looking at it like that one, all right, then we have no way of assessing. We need the argument to be formed correctly so we can trust the conclusion. All right, that's validity there. All right, and then true premises to equal a sound argument. So just be careful is my point with fallacies. We want to go easy on that because a lot of times people are throwing them out. And the other problem I see is that I'll ask them, well, why do you say that? And of course I get the answer, it just is, which is akin to saying, I don't know. Somebody said that this was a fallacy, and I'm telling you it's a fallacy because I heard them say it was a fallacy. That's not helping your cause. So understand them, learn them. Logic and philosophy is awesome, but use it appropriately. All right? So we should be able to give an extensional definition of atheism in which all of its members are internally consistent. If you have a self-referentially incoherent, if not, you have a self-referentially incoherent statement. And that just goes back to me saying, look, if we've got all these different positions we're trying to throw into atheism and they contradict one another, that's not a good thing. You're not doing yourself any favors, okay? You're going to be confusing at the very least to others, and we want to try to have clarity. And the definition hard and soft atheists do not solve that problem, guys. So the second objection is contradictory to latter statements. Now, the second objection, atheism is not a belief system, is contradictory. This is the part in bold there. To be clear, atheism is not a disbelief in gods or a denial of gods, coming from the same website. It is a lack of belief in gods. This is describing an ideology, one of the criteria of a belief system. Okay? Now that statement, this is describing an ideology, that's mine. It shouldn't be in bold there. I'm sorry, that's not from the quote. Again, this comes from, it should be atheist.org.
Atheist.org?
Yeah. I don't know why the URL didn't show up. I apologize, guys. So you can't say, well, it is this, and then turn around and say, but it's not a position. You've just described it as a position. A position which clearly designates what is real and what is not. All kinds of things. So we want to be real careful not to say that atheism isn't a belief system. Again, I'm fine with saying it's not a religion. I have no problem with that. Totally fine. But what I'm saying is that a belief system or a worldview, yeah, it falls under that category. It seeks to answer big questions. You may not apply it that way, but it certainly does. If you ask the atheist, if for instance, if you mention to a professional philosopher and or an atheist who's educated and arguing these things, like a Dawkins, it's the name I was thinking of earlier, if atheism can handle the problem of evil, the grounding problem, they'll say yeah. They'll say that they have a grounding for evil, why they can call things evil. They'll say that atheists can be moral, they can do these things. They have a system in place which fits that model as a belief system. So I really caution you guys to be careful when making such strong claims. I don't think it's a good idea in an attempt, ironically, to make a weak claim, which I don't think holds. So then, moving on. You can disagree with me on some of those, but others, I think it's going to be hard to prove, but you could do it. The common definition you Christians are using is an etymological fallacy. This is what I addressed. This is a new common objection to defining atheism other than the way a particular atheist, the one to whom you're speaking at that point in time, wants to define it. And so this is something that the atheists are doing now, and I think it comes from Aaron Ra. I'm not 100% sure. I've seen it recently. Don't remember exactly where it comes from. The etymological fallacy defined is the assumption that a present-day meaning of a word should be or is similar to the historical meaning. Well, this accusation loses its force if you remember the very first definitions, okay, that I read off. There are modern definitions, modern dictionaries, and dictionary.com wasn't the only one. I was just trying to be fair and provide one of each. That declare that atheism is not a lack of belief, but rather they define it as the statement or the assertion that there is no God. So if Christians are saying this, if you accuse them of an etymological fallacy, you're using the fallacy wrong, or you don't understand it, or you just are throwing it out because you heard somebody else say it, because that's still a contemporary meaning. All right. A good resource for this is Dr. Bo Bennett's Logically Fallacious. You can go there and read the full little article on it. Stuff's free online. We own the book. Great book. But if you can't afford it, I get it. That's fine. But wonderful resource online. So, and again, scholars, even atheist scholars, define it the way the Christians are defining it. It's one of the ones. It's the ones I've just read, which is Graham Oppy. So, yeah, the Christians aren't the only ones using the definition this way. They're not committing an etymological fallacy, guys. So for clarification, to add clarity, when asked to define atheism, An atheist who defines it as a lack of belief has I think here, now this might be a bit strong, so maybe I need to soften it, but I really think they've equivocated on their definition of atheism. Instead of defining the position, okay, of atheism, they have described their subjective mental psychological state. Why? Because that's what atheism.org or com or whatever says it is. And they think, yeah, that's a good definition. And if they're educated, they know it allows them to shift the burden of proof. But it's silly. You're going to have a burden, because if you say this, that it's a lack of belief, and then turn around and say there is no God, you now bear another burden of proof. So it's an extra move that I find to be wholly unnecessary, and an argument that's just it's really not worth having, guys. Honest. I don't understand the advantage of it. I've read enough of the material out there to see where atheists want to incorporate, again, they want to co-opt and other belief systems into theirs. The problem, though, is with these organizations that are doing this and then redefining the definitions, have a problem that they're co-opting in beliefs that are somewhat contradictory, and you're going to have an incoherent worldview that you can't point to. You have no extensional definition then, so you're going to have a coherence problem. I don't think it's a good idea. Again, you can do it. It just seems wholly like a lot of work for nothing. To gain what? I don't understand that. So, when I say equivocated on atheism here, again, folks, just to be clear, what I'm saying is the Christian's asking for a definition of atheism as a whole, as a worldview. Yes, it can be defined. We've talked about that. Okay? And if you want to define it as lack of belief, that's fine, but that's describing a subjective, internal, mental, psychological state, which is not a proposition, which means you're not saying anything that's either true or false. So that's going to become problematic. We're going to see why here in just a second. All right? So the consequences, I can't say that word tonight, can I? Consequences of lack of belief atheism is, if atheism is a lack of belief, it is a statement about someone's psychological condition, not about a worldview. It requires no further entertaining, as it is not an objective position. It's akin to saying, I'm happy, or I'm sad, or I have indigestion. Okay, you're just talking about what you're feeling, what's going on inside. There is no correspondence to anything external. So it's not, I mean, that's fine, but again, I don't understand what one gains in declaring this. If atheism is not a proposition, which is objectively true or false, this means it can't be true any more than it can be false. Again, I'll put it this way, and I wish I had the quote. I spent all day looking for it. Graham Oppy mentions this. It's either in one of his books I read or one of his videos, and he's not the only professional atheist and scholar on either side to make this declaration, which is that there are good reasons to believe both atheism and theism, okay, and that it's not very easy. You're not going to be able to just disprove Christianity with any one argument, or disprove atheism with one master argument. If it was that easy, it would have been done already, guys. Now, that's in no way the exact quote. I'm paraphrasing him there. But it holds to make a good point. For people who want to say there's no evidence, that's ridiculous. In fact, even I just found a video of Matt Dillahunty changing his position on that, saying, yeah, that's not the right thing to say. He's not conceding to Christianity, all right? But he's being honest, and I appreciate that. So it's important to understand that we don't want to make unnecessary moves in our life difficult in talking about these things. And I really feel like if atheism is I don't just feel like it. It's the fact that if it's just a lack of belief, the problem is it's got no propositional content. All right? And if atheism is a lack of belief, one cannot then make a declaration there is no God, as this would in fact be a belief. All right? And again, not just my words, guys, okay? We saw the quotes from the SCP article from, who was it that wrote that? Paul Draper. Okay, not a Christian. So here's a guy with no dog in the fight. All right? In other words, if atheism is a lack of belief, then not only do you not need evidence to be an atheist, one can deny their epistemic duty to believe based on evidence. And that comes from W.K. Clifford. The idea that one should always believe or base their beliefs based proportion to their evidence. Hume, ironically, right, the darling of atheism, said that as well. So we want to proportion our beliefs to evidence. We want to make statements, declarative statements, things that have content, not just say random things about the way we're feeling today in the middle of an argument. That's not how you don't have any foundation to build your argument from. And listen, if you're not asserting a proposition, then your statement can be ignored. And I put that in parentheses. I don't think anyone should be ignored, guys. I really don't. But it's contradictory to say, well, I have no belief, and then turn around and assert a belief. All right, I'm paraphrasing there. But say I have a lack of a belief, and then turn around and assert a belief. And there's some that are going to say, no, you're misunderstanding what the lack of belief means. If you spin it too close to the way you understand Christianity to be true, then what it sounds like then, if you spin it too close to sounding like the denial of theism, is it sounds like you're making every effort to equivocate in order to avoid the shift of burden of proof, which to most who deal with the philosophy or work in this field or study it are going to consider that somewhat intellectually dishonest. So you be careful, okay? You're in trying to craft a clever argument here, which again was Flew by design. He wanted to shift the burden of proof, guys. It's not like we don't know why he did it, all right? So be careful with this. Particularly, again, this is the second time in a week I've run into something where somebody's quoting an atheist who ended up changing his position on something. Flew became a theist before he passed away. So, we want to be careful how we use these things as a position on if God exists. This is going back to quoting Graham Oppy as the conclusion of this presentation. Okay? Atheism should be defined as atheism is the claim that there are no gods. And atheists are those who believe that there are no gods. I don't think it's complicated. Let me exit out of there and get my screen back up here. That's a problem. Do you still see the...
Well, there's a delay, so I cannot quite tell what's showing right now.
All right.
Do you want to
there it is.
Oh,
it's just really, really small. Yeah, I think I need to maximize it there. All right.
Right. Did you guys like the slide presentation?
So hopefully you did. Sorry, that's kind of dry, I know.
Actually, you got the request to
what's that?
Somehow get the slide presentation, so we got to figure that out.
Oh yeah, I can get that slide presentation for you guys. Just forgive me if the presentation is poorly. Like if you may need to do some edits. I'm not kidding, guys. I almost thought I was going to have to cancel tonight. I've been that sick.
Yeah.
And so yeah. Why do I get the feeling? No, it says it's still going. You still seeing video?
Well, right now I am seeing the slide. And you talking.
Okay.
So
Are you seeing the slide the way it was before the full screen?
I'm seeing in that way. It has been presented during your presentation. If that makes sense. So there's a delay, like I said. So
Okay. Yeah. Let me know if
there
it.
we go.
All right.
I see. Oh, you didn't. I don't know. Okay, this Corin said he likes the slide. Yay!
Yay! Thanks, brother.
Want to take questions?
Yes,
Sean?
I'll take some questions on this,
You
guys.
have questions?
Any
Oh,
questions?
there we go. It went back.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure because on my end it's doing something wonky, and so I just want to make sure that it's still working on y'all's end. I'm not worried about it on my end.
Thank you so much, everybody, for keeping everything so polite in the chat section.
Yes, you guys are awesome. All of you, atheists, thinkers,
Yes.
everybody. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it because it just elevates the conversation.
Oh, and please put the capital letter Q in front of question so we can recognize the
So
questions.
I think Air Church is asking a question, so I'll read it. The burden of proof remains on atheists to justify their position. How can they show that atheism is accurate and correct? So, yeah, Jonathan. So, they can make arguments just like the Christian. And burden of proof, I think we've talked about this before, that burden of proof shifts back and forth in a conversation. We don't want to confuse burden of proof with a different type of burden. I always forget what it's called, but this time, that's why I'm sitting here in front of the library. So I can just go like this. Yep, and pull out the books when I'm trying to remember. There's a burden of persuasion, okay, which is different than a burden of proof. Now that's legal stuff, right? But that's really where the law or legal things and philosophy borrow back and forth from one another. So that's so the burden of proof sort of shifts back and forth, and the deal with it is that let me give an example. I make a claim that the ice cream that I eat is the best ice cream in the world. So now I hand it over to Erica, my opponent, and she says,
well, I think triple chocolate is the best.
so she likes triple chocolate. So mine's like a Butterfinger style, right? So I say, all right, why do you think triple chocolate's the best? In other words, she didn't challenge my assertion. She just gave her assertion. So she forfeited the opportunity to request an explanation, an argument. And when she made an assertion, it now allows me to respond with, why do you think that? I'm going to request evidence. The stronger the claim, technically there is more of a burden of proof. And Trent had mentioned this in our interview with him, so you guys can go back and watch that. But sometimes some claims don't require any evidence. They should just be prima facie obvious, guys. In other words, that dogs are canines, it really doesn't require any sort of burden of proof. I mean, in the most formal sense, if that's the debate, yeah, if you make the claim, you're responsible to support it with an argument or some sort of facts, evidence, whatever. But so the objective to convince somebody, that's not your burden. It's simply to prevent that evidence. And then if they say, no, you're wrong, the onus is on them to provide some sort of evidence or refutation as to why, where your argument went wrong or whatever. They don't get to just say, no, you're wrong. It doesn't work like that. So, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Let's see.
That's a question.
All right, Brother Corns, what's up?
How would you define a properly basic belief?
How do I find a properly basic belief? Oh, properly basic beliefs. So I think he's referring to Plantinga, which is tricky because I'm not entirely 100% sure on Plantinga's. I'm familiar with Reformed epistemology, but if that's what he's asking about, he caught me off guard there with that. Properly basic beliefs would be, I think Plantinga is referring to foundationalism there. So it's sort of the idea that there are going to be things, depending on if he's hard foundationalist or soft foundationalist, I don't remember, that these are things that are, and Corns, let me know if that's what you're referring to or why you're thinking, what prompted the question. Reformed Baptist, classically apologetic approach primarily. Yeah, so but a properly basic belief, if it's foundationalist, would be something that's either justified prima facie, it's just sort of prima facie obvious, you know it through those means, or, it's sometimes referred to as indefeasible, but that really just means it's foundational in the sense that in the absence of a defeater, it holds. Again, I'm really being very, very basic here. And then the third is that you can trust your senses. You can trust your senses prima facie. You know things a priori. Sorry, I inverted those two.
My fire's hot.
Yeah, it could be that trusting that sense that for instance, I see something, I believe it to be red. Mm-hmm. My senses have generally been trustworthy in the past. Yes. I know where they failed and I can adjust for that.
Or you can think that you are here live with us in a chat, asking questions, that kind of stuff. Does that count?
Yeah. I like Jonathan Soko's answer. I don't know if he's talking to us or not, but it's hilarious. Jonathan says, I just tell people that I looked into it and they're wrong. It's a great strategy. That's awesome. Yeah, spelling, Adam's right. Spelling's not a requirement. We all know what it's like if you're using a phone or even on the computer.
Goodness, I'm the worst.
Because you're
spelling is fun.
Yeah, you're typing so fast that it's just really, really, really hard to to be able to keep up.
I wish my best friend Happy New Geese 1 year instead of Happy New Year because I was typing on my phone.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's hard, folks. And
autocorrect.
Not to mention if you're having a debate in the chat and you're trying to keep up with somebody else, then it's difficult. The only one I don't like is when folks are they're being dishonest because they're going and looking something up and pasting it into the chat. And they're not telling you that that's what they're doing. That's sort of frustrating. But yeah, for spelling mistakes, yes, we have much grace for that, Brother Adam. He says in the comment. Oh, you're welcome, Cornside. Yeah, I hope. And there's so properly basic, and there's also this sort of Brother Corns that there are criteria for that that are just sort of popping back into my head that Planning asserts in terms of the sensus divinitas and the sort of being able to trust your intuitions, things given by God. But if I remember right, Planning doesn't very clearly tease some of it out to the satisfaction of a lot of epistemologists. Some love it, some are just like, man, I don't know. I'm on the fence. I don't hate it or anything like that. It's just not an argument or a method rather that I use for epistemology. Well, in fact, Planning is not I take that back. He is not a foundational. Well, maybe he is, but he's an externalist anyway. He's not an internalist like I am. So, yeah, you're welcome, brother. Any other questions that came up, Mama, that you're thinking of? That
Adam says, so could you address this argument from science only? I guess his question is that, can science prove everything? Is that what you mean, Adam? Could you address this argument from science only?
Yeah,
I think his question is that, does everything have to be proved by science?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I'll talk about that as evidence in a second. Utopia Buster, you're right. If you're going to engage with atheists, be well versed in the type of arguments there are and how they're critiqued as well. Yeah, that's right. And and research them. If Bill Craig Dr. Craig gives an argument and cites something, look it up so you understand, and make sure you understand it. Because if you use that as evidence, you better understand what it means and the ramifications of it are, or it'll blow up in your face. And then, Adam, yes, would this be the same as justified true beliefs? So JTB, justified true beliefs, are a model for how do we know we know something, we have knowledge, right? Certainty not required. And so some have tried to abandon JTB, justified true belief, because of the Gettier problem. I'm not convinced that the Gettier problem really did much. In fact, most epistemologists nowadays sort of go, yeah, no, it has problems with for a number of reasons, which if you guys want me to get into it, I will, but otherwise it's just a lot of epistemology. But then other people, in order to make justified true belief strong, to hold up against the Gettier problem, which is this idea of being right but by luck, okay, is that you have some sort of extra additive warrant, if you will. I don't think that's necessary. I think what I'm starting to really enjoy is evidentialism as epistemology, the idea that just evidence is sufficient, and you're just really taking it from a Bayes, approach of weighing it out, or just a common sense approach of going, how much can I trust this evidence based on the type of evidence it is? Now, that was a question Adam asked, right, about evidence? Or did I read that?
His question was, he was actually, he had two questions, right? And the second one was, would this be the same as justified true belief? So I think you're covering that one.
But the one on evidence, he asked one about evidence, correct?
The other one was, does everything have to be proved by science? The arguments from science only. That was his other question. Yeah,
so no, you don't need evidence from science only. If anyone's interested, I wrote a paper on evidence and particularly for defending, I don't remember the title, it's one of these long academic titles, evidence and yeah, I can't tell you right now off the top of my head, but it deals with evidence, looking at it from the position of philosophy, particularly epistemology, the legal side of it, the historian's approach, as well as there's one more. Textual criticism, and looking at how the Christian uses evidence and does that it meet all these different criterias. And I lay our methods up against these criterias, and it held by the end of the paper. And what's interesting is I sent it over to my uncle, who's an attorney, and said, hey, man, take a look at the legal side of this, because I've got a ton of work on text on evidence and law from way back when, a long time ago. I was planning on doing, before I was saved, I was studying law in my undergrad program before I got saved and became Christian and went off to study theology. And so I have a basic remembrance of it, but I pulled out all the textbooks, got a few extras, and I still, after I wrote the paper, I sent it over to Bruce and said, what do you think? And he came back and said, man, this is excellent. And he's the kind of guy, if you guys know Bruce, he's just as happy to go, that was terrible. So he has no problem pulling punches. So I appreciated that from him. And so if anyone's interested in it, the paper It's 40 pages long. It's almost 11,000 words, but 20 of it's the appendix because I'm giving a lot of reference material you guys can use. So that you're, in other words, you're not just saying, well, this is the case because Sean said it or these other academics. You can look at the methods. It actually talks about the methods for examining evidence and explains how we don't have to just use science. And to be honest, here's the irony, guys. Science uses philosophy. It uses mathematics. It's using all the same stuff for the most part that we're using. And in fact, certain kinds of science has to use the same speculative methods we do because they don't have a way to reproduce the experiments. So they have to use thought experiments. Einstein's elevator is a thought experiment. So when people say, well, you can't use thought experiments and those kinds of things as arguments or in arguments, you've got Einstein's elevator, Schrodinger's cat. These are all famous thought experiments from science, but that's a philosophy tool. So nothing wrong. And in addition, it's also a misunderstanding when people say stuff like, well, that's just a philosophical argument and that's not evidence. That's not true. If you take something as simple as the kalam, everything that begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Generally, then it goes on, you'll present other arguments to finish your case. You don't stop there. But this argument refers to cosmic background radiation. You're going to quote all kinds of scientific data. So, ironically, one other thing to note is evidence isn't really evidence until it's in an argument. Because up until that point, it's just raw data. It has to be interpreted. So when someone says, well, I believe atheism because science and logic, you just kind of look at them and go, what about science and logic exactly? I don't know what that means. What argument? And understand that you've got multiple interpretations for said data, which becomes evidence when you present your case. So hopefully that makes sense. And Utopia... Oh, thank you. Utopia Buster, you're right. There is a big difference between YouTube atheists and actual atheist philosophers, and you're absolutely right, brother. That you may note that atheists rarely ever cite atheist philosophers. And in fact, I'll be honest, I've seen some stuff lately that is absolutely abysmal. Misquoting stuff, cherry-picking data. And these are YouTube atheists that have channels. I won't name them by name because I'm going to get on them in Erica and I's next formal video we're working on. We've got a stack of, like I said, academic papers we're trying to get through in books because we don't just want to present the argument for evil and the defense of it, but we're supporting what John did recently in his defense, responding to Cosmic Skeptic. And so we wanted to really take a deep dive because, as you guys know, we're not afraid to get deep. We're not afraid to take an hour if we need to do a video where John can't. I mean, 28 minutes his video was already much longer than his viewers are used to seeing, and it was jam-packed full of good stuff. But to really get into the arguments and explain them and give you guys some great material, you have to go into it deep. So Erica and I are digesting all that right now, and hopefully within the next week we'll have that video out for you guys.
If problem of evil is something
you're welcome,
want to
Adam.
learn more about, I'd love to hear from you. So if you have specific question about something you think we should cover about problem of evil, please email us because I want to hear from you. You can email us at hello@believingthinkers.com. Okay? And let's see, another question from Corinth. Could I just say that agnosticism is a proper term to refer to lack of belief, atheism?
Say that one more time. Sorry, I was reading I was reading a comment when you started, but then I stopped and I didn't catch all of it.
Could I just say that agnosticism is the proper term to refer to lack of belief, atheism?
To me, I think, yeah. Who's that coming from?
Corinth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so, really. I mean, the atheist is going to object to that, Corinth, because they've said that's the only unifying principle in their whole thing that's not a worldview, that's not a position, that's not really a thing. It's a strange position to me. Again, this is on atheist.org. It seems to be contradictory. Now I'm using seems there. I don't want to hold the strong position that it is because I didn't scrutinize it carefully, and I want to be fair to them. But it certainly seems contradictory on their end. It also is going to depend on how they define lack of belief, because if they want to, some people can sort of try to maneuver around in a slippery way to respond to the problem, to say, well, no, lack of belief doesn't mean I don't have a belief. It means I'm lacking and they equivocate in there. And so it can be a little bit tricky. You have to pin them down. But to me, it sounds like agnosticism. And we want to be clear. Again, that's why you'll see Graham Oppy, professional atheist philosopher and philosopher of religion, professor at this, clearly defining what he's talking about. That is critical in philosophy so that we don't have this confusion. It's not a good thing to be confusing for those atheists that are, trying to figure out where to be in the spectrum. It's not a good thing. I don't know why, people are promoting that. But anyway, hopefully that made sense.
It's emotional, I guess. I don't know.
And then, yes, as they were talking about something there, something subjective, people truly know that there is no God. Yeah, they can never know that. That's right. And that's why you'll often hear atheists, even the Four Horsemen, most of them will say, I've got video of Lawrence Krauss saying, I can't disprove God. They're smart enough to say that, guys. They can't know for sure that there is no God. Unfortunately, hey, Brother Nate, then they tend to use rhetoric to sort of spin it to make it sound like they still have that same level of confidence, and that you can know without using that language, which is very clever rhetoric. I find it to be a little bit dishonest, to be honest, because it leads people to conclusions that just aren't true. And hey, to be fair to the atheists, there's certainly, I'm sure, some Christian theologians or philosophers that have done it. But not as many that I'm aware of, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's one doing it or 100 on either side. None of us should do it. We should be intellectually honest about these things. So, Adam is don't let Adam fool y'all. That young man is almost my age, but he's brilliant. But he's very humble, a good guy. I'm hoping to have him on sometime in a video interview. Adam's a great guy. Adam, you would get along with Utopia Buster, great, if you're not already. Nate is hilarious, of course, and Corinth. All of y'all, I mean, everyone, we're very blessed to have a lot of great people that come and check out what we're doing and that really partner with us. I never like to say fans, and viewers seems right, but I don't know what else to call y'all. Thinkers. Oh, wait, that's right. All right, so any other questions? And hey, listen, if y'all can, do us the honor of supporting us. We appreciate it, those that do, but consider partnering with us. If you enjoy what you're seeing, for those that don't know already, we have a Patreon thing that we do, and the cool thing about it, okay, is that it's actually, and I'll let Corinth, you guys check out, some of these guys will probably mention it in the chat now that I've said something about it. This Patreon thing that we're doing isn't just, hey, donate money on Patreon to what we're doing. No. It's an online classroom where we're doing weekly courses. So far, we're covering basics of Koine Greek, tools of philosophy, and we're doing a weekly series. Those two are monthly, and we're doing where I put out a video once a month on those, and we're doing a weekly series on theology. So, Utopia Buster, you're right. Great argument from Planning on Other Minds. And in fact, that's something we've been diving into. Brain of That stuff. There's some really good material out there as far as all that goes. Thought experiments and whatnot. And we're, again, very blessed to have everyone on here. And, we appreciate all the support, love, and everything. So is any other final questions? I'm going to get going. I've been sick and I could use the rest, but I'll stay if there's any other burning questions. And next week on Saturday, probably early afternoon again, 2, 1, 2, 3-ish, we're going to have Trent Doherty back on the channel, and we're very excited about that. And you can look forward to seeing the Problem of Evil videos coming out soon. Extend that argument to intuition opposing Hume. I'll have to see. Are you talking about Utopia Buster? You'd have to give me a little more context. I think I know what you're talking about. Are you talking about now? The argument to intuition. Give me a little more context for that. Or are you talking about for the video in the future? because I know Hume's got that argument for evil. I assume that's what you're talking about. What is the best argument you've heard lately from atheists? Adam, that comes from Adam Martin. Thanks, Brother Corns, for that link. Never mind, go to bed. I'll answer that real quick. I'll tell you what, a great resource, and you can. It's inexpensive. Graham Oppy's got a couple of books on atheism. If you want to see what good atheists, how they argue, his stuff's worth it. Not offensive at all. Great to read. Very intellectual. He's got a couple of arguments. Probably the best one that they have is always going to be some of the problems of evil, though they're not.
I think so. I think it's the strongest.
Yeah, and Trent Doherty's got a paper where he did arguing with I forget who it was now, about the evidential problem of evil, but particularly like using Bayes' theorem, probability theorem, which is really, really neat. The thinkers that are on Patreon, Trent gave that to us to take a look at. I think he did. Anyway, I'll make sure and get that to you. All right, well, thank you all so much. We love you all as always. Any final thoughts, Erica?
Well, it was really fun to talk to everybody, so thank you for coming, everyone.
Yes.
Nice to see you all.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. We love you all as always, and look forward to seeing you again soon. God bless.
Yes.
And are we going to see you later in the vocab? Of course. Oh yeah, I'll be there. I gotta drink some water,
Right.
eat some ice cream, but I'll be there
Ice
at.
cream time.
I think it's 11 my time, so I got some time for the vocab hangout. No problem, Adam. No problem, man. I love y'all. I love the questions. I'm happy to do it. So excited about seeing y'all on Saturday. Yeah, I'll get to that Utopia Buster. Use recent research on planning his argument. The problem of evil, and that's the reason why we've been diving into it. I've got. Can you hand me those two books over there, Pumpkin? Yeah, that one, the three, the stack, that one, and then Feinberg's. So, because if you guys know, planning is one of his big arguments, and then one of planning his big arguments is I won't hold up planning his book, but is I've got it over there. The free will argument. Well, Paul Feinberg in Many Faces of Evil addresses it. It's huge. It's awesome. It's a huge book, monster. Swinburne stuff, but it's going to be over most people's heads. But then this is awesome. Modification for Epistemology and Free Will. This book by Locke. Oh my goodness. Talking about dealing with OIC or Ought implies can and PAP, which is Principle of Alternative Possibilities, and all the logical stuff in there and modern contemporary arguments for it. So just some great stuff, but that's why it's been taking us a while. Eric and I started at the very beginning where the arguments started back in 1950s, and they've been catching up with all the research so that it's current, so we don't miss anything. So we do that because we love y'all and we want to be helpful to present material for you that is relevant and makes sense. Mm-hmm. All right, well, if I don't see anything else, Gettier has been refuted by planning a... Oh, yeah, well, certainly, some of planning stuff on Gettier's problem I'm okay with, but there's other people that have... Tim McGrew did a publication on it. He and his wife, Linda, did this one, Internalism and Epistemology, where he addresses the Gettier problem quite a bit. He's an internalist, so that's why I like it. But yeah, planning, if you're an externalist, I think he does good. And it's just a ton of good stuff. I'm going to eat some ice cream, and I'll see those that are at Vocab's Hangout. Love y'all. And please hit that like button if you guys haven't already. We appreciate it. And anything else, Pumpkin?
No.
I keep saying I'm going to go.
Yeah,
All right. We're really going to go. Love y'all.